بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رضي الله تعالى عنه وسدد التابعين وعلماء عاملين وأئمة أربع مجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So to continue our eighth class on Umdat'l Bayan, right now I'm at work, so I'm kind of like sneaking and doing the class real briefly. Last class we began to discuss. We're getting into the section of ilm fiqh, the science pertaining to fiqh. Covering the mu'amilat, the actions of the Fard al Ayn. So we briefly discussed water and its legal judgments last class, which was there's three types of water. You have mal mutlaq, absolutely pure water, and what's the judgment, or how do you determine if water is absolutely pure? Is it has not been altered in its color, its taste, or its smell. Its judgment is that it's permissible to use it in acts of worship and ordinary things. The second judgment of water is mal tahir, pure water. All right, pure water meaning that it has been altered in its color, taste, and smell, right, by something that's considered pure. It's like mop water, Kool-Aid, water for washing dishes. These things are pure, considered pure. Its hukum, its judgment is you cannot use it for ordinary acts of worship, but you can use it for ordinary things. That's an ordinary acts of worship. You cannot use it for acts of worship, but you can use it for ordinary things. All right. The third is hukum ma'al najis, right? Absolutely impure water. Its hukum is that it is haram to use it for anything of acts of worship or even use it for ordinary things. Now, what do we mean by using water for acts of worship? We're talking about ghusl, wudu, and istinja. Okay, uh, you know, ordinary things like I mentioned, cleaning and cooking purposes. So we mentioned that. So we mentioned a little bit. What I want to mention a little bit is about removing impurity. If you have an impurity and nedges on you, we're going to talk a little bit about pure things. You have those things that are considered impure by the eye, where you can see it, right? And then you have those things that are impure, that is by knowledge, that is known to be impure. Okay. Now, so we're going to discuss this just as briefly as possible. So let's talk about removing things that are impure. If you get something impure on your garment or on your place of prayer, more so your garment than anything, he says, it says when it is impurity on a particular place, then that place must be washed, right? If you had a prayer rug and somebody, I don't know, got urine on there, you have to wash the urine off where it touched on the rug before you're able to pray on that rug. He said, if it is unclear where the impurity is, then wash the entire garment. Okay? So if you're unsure where the impurity landed, then you wash the entire garment. If you know exactly where the impurity landed at, then you can just wash that area, or wash that thing where the impurity landed. He says, if someone is unsure whether the impurity has touched their garment, he should sprinkle water on it and wash it. And if something gets on someone and he is unsure about whether or not it is impure, then he doesn't and he does not sprinkle water. He doesn't sprinkle water on it. If whether if your uncertainty is strong that it's impure, then you wash it. If your certainty is strong that it wasn't something that was impure, then you don't have to bother washing it. No. He said if he remembers his impurity on it while he's praying, then he should stop the prayer unless he fears that he will miss the time of the prayer. Meaning that where you're praying out of durori, out of necessity, it's time for, let's say it's Asr time, and you're praying on the very tail end of Asr, knowing that you're like seconds or maybe minutes away from Maghrib. If you're praying Asr, you started the prayer for Asr, in the little bit of time Asr's in, no matter whether it's 5 minutes or 5 seconds. Once you takbir ihram, that is considered Asr time. Now, what the Shaykh is saying here, what the Shaykh is saying here is, if you're praying and you remember you had impurity on you, you're supposed to stop the prayer unless you fear that you'll miss the time of prayer, meaning that the prayer time will come and go. If someone prays with impurity on him out of forgetfulness and then he remembers after the salams, then he repeats the prayer that as if it is still within that time. So if you salam out, we're talking about this. Let's talk about this Asr time. Remember, I said you have about 5 minutes or 5 seconds, either way, and you're praying, and you remember you had some nedges, some filth on you, and you continue, and you didn't remember until the prayer was over, right? Then you repeat the entire prayer again, and you remove the nedges and go back and repeat the entire prayer. وقال المؤلف رحمه الله Shaykh Uthman ibn Fodiyo, he says, we're talking about pure things, things that are considered tahara, fasal tahara, right? Pure things are dead things that have no blood, okay? Dead things that have no blood. You know, a flower is dead, it has no blood, it's not alive, right? Things of that nature. I'm not going to go through a whole list of what's considered, what's dead and what's not dead. I'm pretty sure, we can research it. We can research that on our spare time. My suggestion to the students is research those things that are relevant to you, that you come across on a day-to-day basis, versus looking for things that are irrelevant to you. You might be looking up, an electric eel, and we don't have, you may not have electric eels in your locale. Okay. Now, so he said dead things are that which have no blood, marine animals, even when their life is up on the land, has been extensive. Animals which have been properly slaughtered. Now, this is important, even with halal food, halal meat, you know, uh, meat that has been properly slaughtered according to the method of the Muslims is considered tahara. So, what do you think the opposite is? The impure. Impure is haram meat, and you have to think about it, people consumption of haram food. I have to think about, a person is eating something that is impure. Impure is like, urine and defecation as well. So, you eat haram food, let's not even discuss about what the hadiths mention about where it makes your salat, your dua invalid. But we're just talking about just from a fiqh perspective, right? From a person of fiqh, because when you engage and start to learning your Fard al Ayn, you start to climb in the maqam, your station, of your spiritual state, of your spirituality. Now, so that which has been properly slaughtered, its contents, except that which is forbidden to eat, right? And you're talking about those animals that are haram for us to eat, like pig, you know, those kind of animals, and a gorilla. You can't eat a gorilla. But anyway, wool, hairs of the camel and goat, down feathers in their hair as well. If hair is from a pig, as while he's alive, it is considered, and as long as the hairs are detached, the hairs are accepted as tahir in the Maliki school. So like some of the old hairbrushes, they're the hairs are made from boar's hair. You're brushing your hair with boar, a pig. In an animate being, it is a lifeless in its lifeless body, which has been separated from it, except that which intoxicates. Okay, we're still talking about pure things. A living being which with its tears, its sweat, its saliva, its nasal mucus, or its eggs, even when he has eating that which is impure, except of rotten flesh, and what comes out after death. Human milk. So you have nursing mothers. A lot of nursing mothers always ask this question. It's kind of popular. You know, if my breast milk begins to leak while I'm in the prayer, is my prayer valid? Absolutely. Because breast milk, human milk, is considered tahara. I mean tahor, pure. With the exception of milk from deceased people. So milk from dead people. Milk from dead people is not permitted. It's not considered pure. He also mentions here that the milk of any other thing follows the judgment of its meat. So you wouldn't be able to drink pig meat. I mean pig milk. I'm sorry, pig milk. The urine and the feces of a permissible creature, except that which feeds on that which is impure. Okay, so an animal, like for instance, how we fertilize the ground. You may make salad, you fertilize the ground. And in your fertilization, there may be cow manure being utilized for the fertilization of of the grass, and you want to pray, and you smell that its sources is manure. It's permitted to pray because we consume uh, cow, uh, cow meat, beef. Now, vomit which has not been altered from food stuff. So if you threw up and it's still in chunks of food, then it's considered pure. Okay. Yellow bile. That's a person that when they throw up, that liquid bile, phlegm in the gallbladder of a permissible thing. Blood which has not been shed. So if you got blood on you from whatever the case is, as long as the blood has not been shed. So if you get shot, you have to, change those clothes, or unless you have no other choice and it's out of necessity, but you need to change those clothes and get that blood off of you, so on and so forth. If somebody cut themselves, blood which has been shed. It said musk in the sack, farm produced, fertilized by impure things, and wine which has become vinegar or acidified. Real quick, nejas, things that are considered impure, are the exception to all the above. All right. The dead of other what has been mentioned. Okay, so we mentioned dead human beings. I'm sorry, we mentioned dead things that have no blood. So the opposite of that will be a dead thing that has blood. All right, that's that which is not distinguished from being alive or dead. Discharge of sperm, prostatic fluid, pus, mucus, blood that is spilt or caused from a puncture or whatever the case is. Black bile, ashes or the smoke of something that's considered impure. All right. Urine, human feces, forbidden things that are haram. and those things that are makruh. And in closing, those things that has been excused, like overlooked. What is overlooked from these is that which is difficult to remove, like the impurity of the consistent discharge, uh, like a person that has incontinence, has a persistent discharge. The clothes of a woman who's breastfeeding, her body, if she has made every effort in effort to remove the urine of an infant. Okay. Vomit and pus that's less the size of a coin, and that coin is like a half a dollar, like the spot of a half a dollar. Some ulama even described it to be the size of you can you can see it. You have to look it up, but on a donkey, we don't utilize donkeys and things like that. Often not in America anyway. But there's a spot on the donkey. It's that size. He said if it's bigger than that size, then that's considered. It's not excused. Traces of a fly which is landed in feces, the lower hem of the woman's garment, which is extended in order to cover her body, which is also another thing you have to understand. Is specifically, a woman is permitted to drag her garments, despite of what people think. Oh, I'm not going to walk because the ground is dirty. A woman is permitted to drag her garments, and this is also supported by the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, for men, it is not acceptable. Our garments should at least be at ankles length and no higher than mid calf. So at minimum, ankles length and no higher than mid calf. Otherwise, any of us, and students, my students, we shouldn't be arguing with people about isbal. Isbal is from ankle length up to mid calf. This is also in the Muwatta Imam Malik as well. And the traces of a sore which has not been cured, like if you have an open wound or anything like that. So I will post these notes as well in the section of the text in our Google Classrooms. You know, um, right now I made the recording. Like I said, I mentioned it last night. I posted in some of the groups and sent to some people individually that our my page ain't as popular, so I can't do live right now. So if you want to help that out, spread the word, tell people to follow me. Something of that nature. Get our numbers up. I need 1,000 followers in order to continue doing live classes. Otherwise, we'll just have recorded classes. All right. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.